Greetings and welcome to another sort of special end of the year top 10 list for Morrowind mods released over the course of 2015. It is that time of year again when we tend to rank our favourite things from the past year using questionable metrics and personal opinions, and needless to say this list represents my own personal choices and may not reflect or include all the mods you might think deserve recognition. As I've said many times in the past, I'm fairly biased in favour of content mods over graphical mods like texture replaces, so do please keep that in mind. But in any event, you can use the interactive menu right here to sort of select an option to jump to a particular mod on the list, or use the timestamps in the video description below. And all in all, I'm happy to say that 2015 was an amazing year for Morrowind modding. Nearly 500 new mods were released for Morrowind in 2015, far more than the 300 or so released in 2014. And there were a huge number of content mods like new landmasses and town mods, and unfortunately we can't show them all off here, but this top 10 list reflects my personal favourite mods of 2015, so why don't we just go ahead and get started with number 10, WonderWind. Now, WonderWind is a dungeon and sort of a town mod that was released on October 31st, 2015 by King Moyer, aka TrulyOriginalArtCom, and it's a very unique mod, and at first I actually wasn't going to include it on this top 10 list. I was going to include King Moyer's other mod, Asmodeus Island, which is another great mod. It's a landmass and dungeon mod released earlier in the year, but ultimately I decided to go with WonderWind for the pure and simple reason that it's a bit more of a unique concept. It's basically a dungeon within a dungeon within a dungeon, or sort of a dungeon hub mod, if you will. I suppose an apt comparison might be the that massive dungeon you find in Skyrim, whatever it's called. It's a black something, the one with all the Falmer in it and the Dwemer ruins. And WonderWind is kind of like that. You find a massive glacial cavern underneath Solstein that's filled with different dungeons that you can delve, including Dwemer ruins, Daedric ruins, and tombs and caverns, and I think there's even a mining tunnel in here somewhere. And they're filled with challenging fights that require a high-level character to get through. And there's just a huge amount of content in this mod. It'll take you anywhere between 5 and 10 hours to complete, depending on your character's level and how many fights you go through. But it kind of reminds me in a lot of ways to Dungeons and Dragons. It has a central hub dungeon, several side dungeons and adventures. I think there's half a dozen dungeons in total, and there's even a traveler's tavern in the middle of it all, just filled with adventures, making merry and conversation. And there's even a town in here, which is a sort of town mod part. There's a town buried deep in the ice that you can discover if you go through these dungeons long enough, and it has some really interesting aesthetics going on, with a mixture of Nordic, Imperial, and ice cavern architecture that's just very impressive looking. And there's also some very cozy and atmospheric interiors, and really King Moyer has gone all out in the sort of detail department to create this very interesting and creative subterranean world, and that's really my main reason for including it as my number 10 pick for the 10 best mods of 2015. Moving on, for number 9, we have Blade Safehouse, a house mod that was released on June 2nd, 2015 by Lithok, and this is a very special house mod. It actually won our Mod of the Month award way back in June, and there's a good reason for that. It is spectacularly unique and pretty much a one-of-a-kind house mod. You're not going to find another one quite like it, and the reason for that is that it uses a lot of complicated scripts, but I'll get more into that in a bit. For now, I'm just going to mention some of the other basic things that I like about it. For example, you don't get this house right away. You actually have to do a number of vanilla quests, which involve the bloodbath in Balmora before you can get this house, and it also comes with all the necessities you'd expect from a house mod. It has lots of storage spaces and display areas, and it has armor mannequins for displaying armor. Basically all the things you'd come to expect from a typical house mod. And speaking of armor display, this is the one thing that is really unique about Blade's Safehouse, and really this is the one thing that it does better than pretty much any other house mod that I can think of, and that it has an armor sorter, and not just any kind of armor sorter, it's a visual armor sorter. When you hit that button, all the armor in your inventory just sort of magically flies out and flies to the nearest mannequin that it's sorted to, and just attaches itself, as you can see here, and it's an amazing process to watch. You can just sort of imagine the number of complicated scripts required to pull this off. Lithok must have spent hours just trying to get all this to work, and it is amazing. There's a armor mannequin for each type of armor in the game, like Ebony and Halalu and Chitin, and there's a different hall located for each different type of armor. Like there's a hall that's just for heavy armors and a hall just for light armors and medium armors. And moving on, the second really unique thing about Blade's Safe House is the library, which is this massive complex right here. It's a series of halls where you will find your bookcases lined up against the alcoves there. And there's a librarian here that you can give books, and when you give him a book, he'll automatically just start traveling off to the nearest location to place a book, and he'll travel along, and you can follow him the entire time until he places the book on the podium, which is, again, another process that you can just sort of watch. And this is why it's my number 9 pick for the best mods of 2015. You don't really see any other mods that are quite like it. But anyway, going on to number 8, we have the Nyx Hound and Cliff Racer Replacer mods by Peterbit and Furim, and these are new meshes and textures mods released on May 18th and November 16th of 2015 respectively, and you'll notice that I've basically combined two separate mods into the same slot here, and the reason for that is, well, they're very similar and basically do the same things. They replace the creature models for two separate creatures, the Nyx Hound as you can see here, and also the Cliff Racer, and they were of course created by the same people, so it sort of makes sense to combine them. And they're really both fantastic mods. What they do is they replace the very low resolution, low poly models of the Nyx Hound and Cliff Racer of vanilla Morrowind, and basically modernize them with these very high detail, fantastic looking models like the Nyx Hound here, which just, it looks very much like it's come to life in a sort of modern setting, and I love the way it looks. You got the beady insectoid looking eyes and everything else, and of course people will remember that the Nyx Hound replacer actually won our Morrowind Modathon Month competition way back in May. It really impressed our judges, and it's easy to see why. And going on to the Cliff Racer Replacer mod, it also won the November Mod of the Month category by our popular online polls. And it's, again, a very fantastic looking model. I'm not sure if you can tell here, but the wings of these Cliff Racers are actually transparent. You can see the sky through them, which is an amazing little detail. But anyway, the reason why these mods are on my top 10 list of the best mods of 2015 is because they do play a very important part in helping to update and modernize the game. I mean, Morrowind is nearly 14 years old now, and it is showing its age a little bit, and mods like this really help to update the graphics and make it easier for new players to start playing Morrowind. For number 7, we actually have two mods, Dagonfell Updated and Epic Dagonfell. And Dagonfell Updated is a town mod originally released on November 20th, 2015 by Hedgehog12. And Epic Dagonfell is also a town mod released on November 29th, 2015 by Mike and Ike. And you'll notice that I'm basically a dirty cheater when it comes to top 10 lists. There's actually 15 mods on this top 10 list and not 10, and that's because it's really difficult to decide sometimes, particularly in this case, where we have two really good Dagonfell mods that were released at practically the same time, within 9 days of each other, and two different authors with two vastly different visions for Dagonfell. So I can't decide between them, so I thought I'd include both of them in the number 7 slot and let you guys decide which one you'd prefer. In this case, we have Epic Dagonfell, which takes Dagonfell into an interesting direction that, well, basically emphasizes a dramatic and epic landscape. You'll notice that there's all these Dwemer towers in the background just sort of dominating the scene, and that Dwemer bridge there that guards the harbor of Dagonfell, and it really creates a fascinating bit of scenery that really just draws you in. Whereas Dagonfell Updated goes in a very different direction. It focuses more on aesthetics and architecture, and it also completely changes the layout of Dagonfell. And you'll notice in particular that there is a unique architectural style that's now applied to Dagonfell with these mushroom houses, along with some unique textures applied to the rest of the buildings. And it really makes Dagonfell a sort of standout village with a style that's just entirely unique on the island of Odenfell. And Epic Dagenfell is a bit different. It sort of takes the current style of the town of Dagenfell and then just expands it to epic proportions, as the name of the mod would imply. And it really is quite awe-inspiring, if I do say so myself. The first or second or third time you enter the town, it's just really amazing to see, and especially the sense of verticality that all these giant looming Dwemer towers in the background add. It's just, I really love that effect. And going back to Dagenfell Updated, a nice little detail with it is that it actually adds rain effects to the buildings and streets of Dagenfell. When it rains, you'll start seeing puddles form on the streets, and you'll see rain coming off of the rafters from above. It really is a very nice detail that just sort of adds to the atmosphere of this rather unique village that's been created with Dagenfell Updated. And Hedgehog12 has done an amazing job at creating this vision of Dagenfell, and that's just the crazy thing about this, is that both of these mods are really high quality, and yet they came out at basically the same time. You have to wonder if the authors planned it like that, even though their mods are completely incompatible with one another. And going back to Epic Dagenfell, one of the things that I love most about this mod, and the one thing I really appreciate that Mike and Ike has done, is he's sort of taken the vanilla feeling of Dagenfell, of this small imperial settlement surrounded by the ancient Dwemer civilization ruins, and he's just expanded on it to epic proportions, and really, both of these mods deserve the number 7 spot. Next up we have number 6, Tel Morgana, and this is a town and sort of a landmass mod that was released on November 19th, 2015 by Furion. And really it's just a massive city that's just sort of off on its own little island north of Dagenfell and the Sheogorath coast. As you can sort of see here, it's a big Telvanni city. I think it's even bigger than Balmora and many of the other cities that you find in Vanilla Morrowind. And something I kind of need to point out before we get too much into showing this mod off is that you'll notice that I have a really bad frame rate in this particular video footage of it, and that has a lot to do with the limitations of the Morrowind game engine. You'll notice I'm using a Morrowind graphics extender setup with MGSO 3.0, and unfortunately, dense urban environments like this one just do not load very well in the Morrowind game engine. But having said that, Tel Morgana is an absolutely fantastic looking mod. I mean, we don't exactly get very many massive city mods to begin with, and this one is just really done very well. It's basically a very detailed, massive Telvanni city with multiple levels. As many of you probably know, with the Telvanni cities, there's typically a giant wizard's tower in the center, and this is basically the same thing. And you have these multiple street levels of Telvanni houses and shops and taverns, and there's just dozens of buildings that surround this central Telvanni wizard tower, and this can act as a player home actually. I think that's the intended purpose, is that the central wizard tower so just be a personal player home. But it's a really beautifully created town, and there's also a nearby Daedric ruin that's just been taken over by Telvanni roots, and there's just some really excellent designs being used here that are just absolutely fantastic. Unfortunately, it is the sheer amount of detail in these exterior environments that is almost certain to create some frame rate issues for a large portion of the player base out there. You're almost guaranteed to get lag if you're using a lower end to medium end computer rig, and some upper end computers are probably going to run into a few issues if you use a lot of graphics extenders and overhauls. But having said that, it really is just an amazing mod. This mod just came out of basically nowhere. And not only is it a massive city, it's also a massive player home. As I mentioned before, this central Telvanni tower basically acts as one giant player home, and it is quite large. There are multiple levels, including several sub-basements and giant Volothian rooms that are just located beneath the Telvanni portion of the tower. And many of these act as display halls with display cases and armor mannequins that you can use to display items, and it really is a fantastic house mod if you're a Telvanni Archmage Lord or something of that nature. But anyway, getting to the meat of why this mod is on my top 10 list, you just don't really see a massive mod of this scale released every day or even every year, and it just sort of popped up out of nowhere. Just showed up on the Nexus one day when there were no work in progress threads, and it's just a beautifully detailed city and a fantastically created player home as well. And it's really one of the best created cities that I've seen outside of a major team project like Tamari Built or Skyrim Home of the Nords. And I believe Furion has created this city entirely by himself, and that's more than enough reason to give it my number 6 slot in the 10 best mods of 2015. Going on to number 5, we have Magic Diversity, a new Meshes and Textures mod that was released on January 22nd, 2015 by Arkin, and technically that release date is a little inaccurate. There was a beta version of this mod that was released in December of 2014, but the finalized 1.0 version with all the features and bells and whistles didn't get released until January of 2015, so I thought it best included in the top 10 mods of 2015 instead of 2014. But anyway, this is sort of a major overhaul of the magic system in Morrowind, completely changing all the spell effects in the game. As you can see here with levitation, you now get wings on your character's back, and it's kind of makes your character look a bit like an angel. But anyway, this is basically another mod that focuses on updating Morrowind's graphics to better match modern day standards, in particular replacing the ancient spell effects of vanilla Morrowind with more high resolution ones, and also a greater variety of spell effects. At least I don't remember a lot of these spells like Paralysis actually coming with unique spell effects before. And this is just a really great mod for mage-like characters out there, particularly people like me who like to use a lot of spells. And it really makes playing a mage a lot more fun, seeing these spell effects being used. And you'll notice that a lot of them tend to be influenced a bit by Final Fantasy, like the Frost Shield that I'm using here. And in any event, graphics mods like this are very important for Morrowind, and that's why it's my number 5 pick for the top 10 mods of 2015. Next up we have number 4, Love in the Time of Daedra, a quest mod released on May 25th, 2015 by Hingham Higher. And this was one of the big Morrowind Modathon competition winners way back in May when we were doing that modding competition in celebration of Morrowind's 13th anniversary. And it's a really in-depth quest mod with lots of dialogue, journal entries, and really just writing in general. This isn't one of those go here and collect 20 Murloc Fins quests. This is a quest mod with a story to be told, and numerous unique characters who all have their own parts to play, motivations, and background stories that explain their actions. And one of the things I just really love about this mod is just how unique it is. This isn't a linear quest mod by any stretch of the imagination. Instead, the author has added 4 separate quests that you can go on simultaneously at the same time, each taking you to the same place, but you can't do them one at a time. So you can't just do one quest and then go back and do another quest. You have to do them all at the same time, or 1 or 2 at the same time, and depending on which ones you decide to accept, the story you're told may be very different, and there's multiple endings for you to discover. And the thing that I just really love about this quest mod, besides the unique quest design and the dynamic storytelling method, is the fact that it's also very lore friendly. A lot of thought was put into developing the story so that it fit in perfectly with Morrowind and Elder Scrolls lore, and not only that, it goes into detail about a rarely mentioned Daedric prince in Morrowind, Hermaeus Mora, and that's the real reason why it's in my number 4 slot of my top 10 favourite mods of 2015. But anyway, going on to number 3, we have Ways Argonians, a sort of NPC and Hairs and Faces mod that was released on July 25th, 2015 by Way, and essentially what this mod does is it overhauls the Argonians in Morrowind. You may recall that Morrowind's Argonians look a lot different than they do in the later Elder Scrolls games, like, for example, Oblivion and Skyrim. And one of the big differences there is that the Morrowind Argonians tended to be a lot less colourful. They were mostly light-coloured skin, and there just weren't very many colour options in general. And what Ways Argonians does is it completely replaces the Argonian body to make it look a lot more like it does in Skyrim. As you can see here, it's a much darker skin tone and also a lot more reptilian looking in my opinion. And you also notice that there are a wide range of different colored face options, like this Argonian here has white and green, but you can also get orange and purple, and an assortment of different variety of colors mixed in, which just make your character look a lot more unique. And here you can see the full Argonian body on display with this mod enabled, and really Ways Argonians just completely replaces and overhauls the default Argonian bodies in Morrowind to make them look a lot more scaly and reptilian, and I think they pull off the look quite well. These models are really high quality in my estimation, and it's certainly a nice addition for players who like to play Argonian characters, and really that's why it's going to be my number 3 in my top 10 pick. Next up we have number 2, Dramatic Vivek, a sort of town and new models and textures mod that was released on June 29th, 2015 by the Ink Bunny, and an important thing to note here is that the release date here is for the final version. In reality, Dramatic Vivek came out with a beta version in December of 2014, but like Magic Diversity, it wasn't really finished until 2015, hence the reason why I'm including it on this list, and really, it's been fascinating watching this mod develop. Originally, I believe the Ink Bunny wanted to make Vivek more dramatic by simply adding in new lights around the city to give it more of a visual flair, especially at nighttime. But from that humble origin, it's turned into so much more, essentially becoming a massive visual overhaul of Vivek, and while it doesn't really change the layout of the city at all, it does add tons of new details like benches, potted plants, railings, and the like, and perhaps most impressively, the Ink Bunny has created at least 100 new models to give Vivek a more unique look and style with signs, frescoes, and artwork that blend in perfectly with the Dunmeri art style. And among other things, the Ink Bunny has also included a new outdoor marketplace with merchants, each of which have unique dialogue and background stories, as well as new items for sale, like Dunmeri toys such as a Gwar doll, among many other things. But essentially what Dramatic Vivek does is it breathes new life into this regional capital of Vardenfell, and I'm sure many of you might remember that the vanilla version of Vivek in Morrowind was really quite sparse in terms of exterior details and clutter, which always struck me as a bit strange. Such an important city as Vivek ought to have more signs of life in terms of exterior development and design, and in terms of clutter, and Dramatic Vivek really fills in that gap perfectly, adding lots of new details, clutter, and unique items like these Talvani banners hanging off the side of that garden there, or these waterfalls in the temple district, and it really all just works perfectly together to really make the city of Vivek look absolutely fantastic. This is probably the best version of Vivek out there, and best of all, it's compatible with pretty much every other Vivek mod that you can think of. It's compatible with the Vivek expansion by Hoghead the Horrible, it's compatible with the Prison Moon Enhanced mod, and the Open Cantons mod, I believe, as well, and really, that's the main reason why it's my number 2 pick for Mod of the Year for 2015. Not only did the Ink Bunny put in an astonishing amount of work with this project, but he also made sure that it was compatible with nearly every other major Vivek mod out there, ensuring the best version of Vivek possible. And finally, we have number 1 in my personal mod of the year, Lithodonia, the Azurian Isles, a major landmass mod that was released on July 12, 2015 by Melkor Dark, and really this mod being picked as mod of the year should come as a surprise to absolutely no one. It was by far the largest mod released in 2015, and Melkor's been working on this project for years now, I think going back to, 2010 or 2011 or possibly even before that. And really, it is just amazing how this project has come along, and even though it's still in the alpha stage and very much incomplete, I mean, there are a lot of things that haven't been included yet. Most of the interiors, for example, still aren't in the final master file, but the exterior environments that Melkor has created are absolutely stunning. You'll see some just beautiful coastal cities like this small town here, and unfortunately we can't include any video footage of the capital of the Azurian Isles, Azura City, because unfortunately the FPS there is like a 3 or 4 FPS with MGSO 3.0. So sadly, I just can't get any good video footage to show you guys of the capital city, which is a real shame because it is by far one of the best urban environments I've ever seen created in the Morrowind game engine, and it certainly dominates the vanilla cities of Morrowind in terms of sheer scale. And so speaking of scale, this is one massive landmass mod. You don't see mods like this get released just any old year. In fact, there's probably only 20 other mods out there in terms of a similar scale for Morrowind. It is just really quite large. I think it's in terms of size, maybe about the size of Solstein, maybe just a bit smaller than that. and it is a really impressive project that's been worked on for a long time now. And speaking of, if you want to help out with this project, I understand that Melkor Dark is accepting any interiors that you might have on your hard drive if you're a modder that you might be willing to donate, especially Velothian interiors, because there are a lot of Velothian settlements like this one right here that require interiors of one kind or another, and also dungeon interiors are more than welcome, and shack interiors. So if you got any of that, just feel free to donate them to the project and help see this project to completion. And going back to what's actually available in the alpha version of the project so far, you'll find that Melkor is essentially an exterior design genius. I mean, these landscapes are just really brilliantly created with lots of fascinating locations and landmarks. And no doubt when Lithodonia actually reaches its 1.0 release date, it'll be one of the most detailed landmass mods to have ever been created for Morrowind. And you just got an interesting mixture of different art styles as well. You got the Dunmeri Velothian architecture, and then you also got some southeastern Asia influences as well, which is an interesting combination. And really, just the sheer scale of this mod and the sheer amount of work and detail that's gone into it is what makes it my mod of the year for 2015. You're just not going to see another mod quite like it. And going on to our honorable mentions, our first honorable mention here is Deep Scorn, a house mod that was released on May 8th, 2015 by Stratify, and it was another one of the Morrowind Modathon competition winners from back when we were doing that modding competition in May. And basically, it's kind of a callback to one of the house mod DLCs that Bethesda released for Oblivion. There was a house mod by the same name that Bethesda created, Deep Scorn, and it's a sort of assassins-based lair. And essentially what Stratify has done is he's taken this concept and he's ported it to Morrowind, and much like in Oblivion, when you find Deep Scorn, it's originally quite empty and abandoned, but you can furnish it room by room by going out and finding a merchant and buying the furnishings from him and slowly upgrading your base to make it look more like a proper assassin's lair. As you can see here, there's a number of rooms included, including a poison garden for creating poisons, a smithy shop with some armor mannequins that you can use to display armor, and also a training room with working archery targets and practice dummies that you can just sort of wail on and then they'll fall back realistically. And there's also a shrine room dedicated to your choice of assassin's deity, such as Mephala or Sithis, and the reason why this mod deserves an honorable mention in our top 10 best mods of 2015 is because it is, in my opinion, one of the better house mods released over the course of the year, with a ton of very handy and convenient features, such as an alchemy sorter, a poison garden, working armor mannequins, and practice dummies. It's really one of the more feature-complete house mods that I've seen released in 2015. Going on to our second honorable mention, we have the Resdayn Revival mod series Holomane Monastery Replacer, a sort of new models and textures mod that was released on March 14th, 2015 by Cult17, aka the Resdayn Revival team. And basically what this mod does is it completely replaces the exterior of the Holomane Monastery to make it look a lot more like the custom art that was created for Morrowind back in the development stages, and also to give a very unique Velothian style flavor to this really very important building in the Morrowind's main quest. And the interior has also been redesigned to a large degree, though a lot of things have been kept the same. You'll now find a few mushroom gardens scattered about there in the main foyer, and also a magic lab with a lot of new models in use, as you can see down here, and basically based off of the Dunmeri tables. And there's also a new multi-level segment to the Holomane Monastery, including some really cool looking frescoes. And far from just being a replacer, this mod greatly expands the Holomane Monastery, which was really quite small before, adding in a number of dedicated rooms like this library on the top level, which just has an absolutely fantastic design. There's a beautiful looking statue of Azura there in the front, and there's a few alcoves along the walls here for books and scrolls, and it's really just a design I absolutely love. And the Resdayn Revival series has been coming out with a number of quality mods over the past few years, years, and this one is really no different. It really overhauls and adds new details to one of the most important buildings to the Morrowind main quest, which is why it kind of deserves an honorable mention in this top 10 list. It just provides a lot of extra atmospheric details to this very important part of the Morrowind main quest. Going on to our third and final honorable mention, we have Dunmer Noble's overhaul and NPCs, hand faces, and also kind of a clothing mod that was released on September 13th, 2015 by Evolga. Basically what this mod does is completely overhaul the looks and appearances of the Dunmeri nobles of Odenfell. You may recall that in vanilla Morrowind there really isn't a whole lot to differentiate Dunmer nobles from the commoner and merchant classes, and what this mod does is give nobles some unique clothing and hairstyles so you can easily tell them apart from the peasants of Morrowind. And each of the 5 great houses of Morrowind has a variety of different noble styles available that reflect the values and characteristics of that great house. Like the Rodarin might use armor in their outfits, the Halalu like fancy bright colored clothing, and the Telvanni are more fond of green robes. And all these new hairstyles and clothing options are just beautifully created and quite detailed. And another thing to note about this mod is that it also includes an option for random Dunmeri nobles to appear in various cities, adding a bit of life to the noble districts of Morrowind towns, with some extra NPCs, and there's also support for Tamari built, so you'll also see Indoral and Dres nobles on the mainland. And all in all, this is another really well crafted mod that brings a bit more life to Morrowind, hence why it deserves an honorable mention on this list. And that pretty much wraps up all of the mods I have for you guys for my personal top 10 list of the best Morrowind mods of 2015. I know I missed a lot of great mods out there, like the texture replacers released by Tidy and Mike and Ike over the past year, but in any event, do feel free to share your own favourite mods from the past year in the comments down below, and I'll see you all next time with the next episode of Morrowind Modding Showcases.